Hello, I'm Don Phipps, Superintendent of the Caldwell County Schools, and I want to welcome you to this edition of Caldwell County Schools Profiles. We have two special guests today on two completely different topics, but both are very relevant to the time of the year that we have. We have Beth Henshaw, who's the lead social worker for the Caldwell County Schools, that will be here in our second segment, and Libby Brown, our PIO, Public Information Officer for our school system, will be talking to Beth about the social work life or the life of a social worker and the roles and the different activities that they play in a school system. It's also School Social Work Week this week, and we want to thank all of our social workers, whether they're in the schools or hospitals or wherever they happen to be, for the work that they do. Thank you so much for making a difference in the lives of the individuals that you work with. Joining with me on the set right now is Dr. Jeff Church. Dr. Church is the Associate Superintendent in charge of Auxiliary Services, and I asked him to come join us today to talk about what's involved in making a weather call, because we hear a lot of feedback from individuals when we make weather calls, and I want you to know what goes into it, the timing and the resources that we use, and then we're going to follow up and finish up our conversation with the conversation about the school calendar so everybody knows what that involves. So, Jeff, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The reason I wanted you to be here today and what I want us to talk about are the pieces of, or the process and the pieces of information that we pull together when we make weather decisions. And we've had a winter, at least the month of January and February, where we've had some odd forecasts where things really looked like they were certainties, and we made some decisions and things didn't quite turn out that way. But it's a complicated and never guaranteed system that we go through, and we're always looking for safety. But for the viewers who might not know, what are some of the resources that you use when you're looking at making a weather decision?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. We use various online tools. We use NOAA. We use the local forecast from NOAA regularly. We use an app that you introduced us to, Ventusky, and it's a very good app. It shows trends and it shows future forecasts, wind patterns, and what have you. We also use Weather Channel apps. We use local forecasts as well on TV. The thing is, we don't start looking at the forecast the night before a weather event. If we're scheduled to have a weather event on a Thursday, we're usually looking at that, tracking that about a week ahead of time. As soon as we kind of see that hit the West Coast and kind of watch it form as it comes across the country. It's not something that we can do just on a whim.
And I know the snow lovers this year have followed their online apps, and they look a week out and they see we've got a 30% chance of snow. Those week out forecasts aren't always accurate, are they?
No, they're not. And one of the things when you're following it like that, you notice how each update it can change, and the amount of accumulation can change, and the percent of precipitation can change as well.
So you talked about being a week out. Let's move forward and say that we're dealing with something that's on top of us, and perhaps it's in the morning or we have something going on that happens during the day. What are the local resources? Because you know the snow or the ice is on top of you at that time because you can see it, you feel it, you see the effects of it. Who are you reaching out to get information at that point?
We reach out to our local emergency management, and generally if we have to be up early in the morning checking roads, we generally call 911 dispatch. We also call the Highway Patrol, and we also call DOT and just see what road conditions are. One of the things that we try to do, and sometimes you get it right, sometimes you miss. Anytime there's a disruption to the school day due to weather, it's a disruption to over 10,000 families, and we do not take that lightly. However, we also know that if there's that disruption, that's a disruption in childcare, and it really changes the routine for parents in the mornings. So if we can make the decision in the evening before by 6 o'clock, we usually try to make the decision so it will go with the 6 o'clock news run. But if we can make the decision then, that gives parents time to prepare. It's easier to prepare 6 p.m. versus 6 a.m. And by doing that, by taking that stance, sometimes you miss the forecast. However, we always want to err on the side of caution because safety is of utmost importance.
I've had many families that have reached out to say that they appreciate knowing early, particularly knowing before they put their children to bed. what's going on. What are situations that would not allow you to make a forecast early like that?
Sometimes it's as simple as you may have a 20% chance, or you may have a 30% chance of accumulation or precipitation. And on those events, usually we have a team of drivers. There's 4 of us that try to go out in all aspects, all area of the county. And we usually start between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And the hard part is you have to make a decision by 5 a.m. because we do have buses that hit the road at 5:45. So we have to make a decision early. And what we notice, or what generally happens, is the front doesn't come in until 6 or 7, and so we're having to make that tough call early on. We use resources on those mornings. We call our local emergency services and DOT and what have you, but we also talk with counties around us and try to see what they're doing, and so we're all kind of doing the same thing and being consistent.
And the geography in our county can pose a challenge.
It can.
And I know when folks are in the southern end of the county and they look out their window or they're driving around and there's not anything, how might that be different in other areas of our county?
It's different. If you drive around Dudley Shoals, you have the rolling hills. You go up to Collettsville, you have the mountains. And you would think a lot of times the roads and the conditions in Collettsville are worse than other areas, but there have been years that it's been worse in the Dudley Shoals in the southern end of the county than it is in the northern or western end of the county. So each event is different, and each situation is different. We have to address that, each one individually.
And we don't know when we've got a forecast of 33 degrees or 31 degrees. I mean, 1 degree difference, we certainly saw that this winter, can make a huge difference in the type of weather we're dealing with. Something you mentioned I want to go back to. A family member may get up at 7 o'clock and look out the window and not understand why decisions were made. And I just wanted to reiterate and stress the fact that our buses roll as early as what time?
Buses roll as early as 5:45.
So we have to allow enough time to tell bus drivers that we're either going to be delayed or not have school. So decisions have to be made well before most families may be up getting their children ready for school. You also use the term disruption of school. And there are really 3 things that we do. We may have an early release, we may have a delay, and we may have a closure for school. And this kind of segues into a conversation about school calendar. What we're required to do in North Carolina is to amass at least 1,025 instructional hours or 185 days. How do the hours work when we miss school?
If the buses run, if the buses are running, then we count the full day. If we come in for a delay, then we have to deduct those hours. And if we miss a day, we have to deduct those hours. The instructional day, we have to deduct those hours from the 1,000. I think in our calendar we have 1,085 hours built in, so we have a cushion there, and we have to count those.
And without trying to muddy the water, which is always a confusing topic, the remote learning days that have been used and may be used in the future allow us to count those instructional hours on days that students aren't there. So we'll continue to work with that and manage it as we go through. The school calendar. This is the time of the year when we do that. We actually had our board last Monday night approve the traditional school calendar. We have a calendar that's slightly different for the early college and the Applied Sciences Academy. It's currently up for the 30-day review and hopefully will be approved at our next board meeting. You mentioned the guidelines of the calendar. Can you share with us start and ending times and anything else that you recall on that we have to think about when we're putting the calendar together?
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's difficult in one way to put the calendar together, but then in another way it's very easy because there's so many rules that we have to follow as a local district because there are no local controls. The state government controls the school calendar, as you well know. We have to start the school calendar the Monday closest to August 26th, and we have to end the Friday closest to June the 10th, I believe, June the 10th or the 11th. And in between those, we have to have either 1,025 hours of instruction or 185 days, but also 215 days for employees. And we think more in student days, but we also have to build a calendar that allows our 10-month employees 215 days of employment. there's not a lot of options between those windows because we're bookend.
Well, in addition, I mean, you got the 26th of August at the beginning, you got the 11th of June at the end. You also have to include all the state holidays, and you have to provide annual leave days where teachers can take accumulated leave. So, as you've said, even though we're building a calendar, the template is pretty much put in place for us. And what we want is local control, the ability to determine when we start and end school. And a goal of that would be to finish the semester before the Christmas break and be able to have an obvious break at a realistic point in time. What else would you want to share with the viewers regarding either weather or calendar or anything like that, since that's our topic right now?
Well, one of the things with local control that would be wonderful with our traditional calendar is to be able to align our calendar with the community college, because we share so many partnerships with the community college that it just makes sense to be able to do that and share that. But hopefully one day we'll come to that.
And we had that this year. It was a special year. I think COVID probably had an influence on that, but we were able to start earlier than normal, and that put us in more of the alignment with the community college, and it worked really well. We had to put 5 remote days in the calendar this year that we don't have to do moving forward, but our start time has moved back to what you mentioned, which is traditionally in the calendar. I guess the most important thing as we're talking about weather and we're talking about school schedules is the focus that we have really on student safety. And just close us out, if you would, with just a reminder to folks that we don't always make decisions that people are happy about, but we're trying to do the best we can. From your perspective, let our viewers know about that.
We are, because it is difficult to make those decisions, because you want to make the right decision and you want students to be safe, but you also you want, if you make a call because you're supposed to get 1.5 inches of ice, you want to have 1.5 inches of ice. You don't want to have nothing. So, but at the end of the day, we want all of our community to be safe, and that is of utmost importance.
And when we think about that, it is the bus routes, and it's the adult drivers and the children on the bus, but it's also faculty members. It also includes high school drivers or anybody else that will be out on the road. So that safety is paramount. Well, thank you for your time today. Very enlightening. I hope it helps our viewers understand a little bit of that. We thank you for joining us for this portion, and we're going to take a short break. We hope you'll come back after the break, and Libby Brown, our PIO, will be here with Beth Henshaw to talk about school social work. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back. We're glad you're with us for this second segment of Profiles. And with me here on the set, we have our lead social worker with the Caldwell County Schools, Beth Henshaw. And I wanted to talk with Beth today because it's School Social Work Week. And first of all, we want to thank you and all of our social workers for the work that they do, the services that are provided to benefit children and families. But I wanted our viewers to understand what the work that's involved, what the roles and the duties and responsibilities are of a school social worker. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been with Caldwell County School System since 2000, so I've been here 21 years. I got my bachelor's degree at Appalachian. I got my master's degree at Virginia Commonwealth University. I love this county. I've worked in lots of schools since I've been here so long. I'm very old. I'm currently at South Caldwell full-time, and I love working with the high school students. I'm married to Garrett Henshaw. I've been married to him for 32 years, and I have 3 children and 2 precious grandchildren.
Well, I know you're proud of all of that. You're also the lead social worker.
Yes.
So when you put the word lead in front of a title, tell us a little bit about what the lead social worker does in the school system.
Okay. First and foremost, I'm there to provide support for our team. So I problem solve with our workers when they have issues or need to discuss something. I'm there for them for support. One of the primary things I do is collaborate with our community partners. We have so many good people in our community that support us and provide us resources, such as Bernhardt. They provide Christmas assistance, and coordinate that all over the county. And they also have a program where they allow us to access funds once a semester to help students in need. So I coordinate that. We have Mount Herman who does shoes. I represent our district on several committees within the community. I just try to go and find as much support as we can get, really, so we can help our kids.
I'm always afraid to name sponsors and contributors because we have so many. One thing we're truly blessed with is just a community that supports and provides resources, and we're thankful for all of that. Tell our viewers a bit about the role of the social worker, not the lead social worker, but a social worker in a school system would be involved in what types of activities?
Okay, the social worker in the school system is a little different because they do a little bit of everything. Their job's very broad. We help students, we help find resources for students. That's one of the big goals of a social worker, is to make sure any barriers that are in the way of that student learning or being successful academically are alleviated or gone. So we work with parents to try to help them understand the barriers. We work in their homes with them. That's another big difference. We make lots and lots of home visits, and we're able to see the student in their own environment and understand a little bit more about what might be impacting that student. Then we are like the liaison, and we go back and talk to the teacher and let the teacher know, you know, this is why we might be seeing these issues, and this is how we can help this student become successful.
So while you may not be in a classroom delivering curriculum, you're playing a critical role, and you're delivering critical services to help ensure that a child gets full access and is able to take part in the educational process as much as possible.
Absolutely, and at the same time we're providing support for the parents and our staff, because that's very important too. For the staff, our staff needs support as well.
I started out as a school psychologist in Cumberland County, and in the setup that we had, there were school psychologists, there was a school counselor, and a social worker. What kind of teaming? You used the term team just a minute ago. Mm-hmm. How does a team concept work with the social worker and the others that they may be involved with?
In this county, it's amazing, and we have been working as teams since I arrived. We all have a school. Some of us have multiple schools, and we work with our nurses and our counselors and our psychologists very closely. An example is our nurses and our social workers, the majority of them have multiple schools, so they try to schedule to be at their schools on the same day. This allows them to discuss with the counselors and the psychologists, if they're there, what issues need to be addressed with students who need help or who need interventions. So that is one of the things that we do as a team. We also meet once a month as a large group, and we do training on important topics that might be coming across the table, or training on things that we need to know. So we do lots of things together as a group or as a team.
And how many social workers do we have with the school system?
We have 13 right now with the school system.
And we're hopeful through state funding and some of the things that we hear from Raleigh that there'll be additional support
for
those positions, and nurses and psychologists and counselors.
Yes,
I'm going to finish up with a question I think that leads into a lot of that. But tell our viewers a little bit about the COVID influence, because there certainly has been an unusual year, but I think it has impacted those that are working with students and families in a great way too.
Yes, there's been several changes or impacts. One of the biggest ones, I think, is we're seeing so many more people in survival mode, just trying to get by. Parents, staff, students, everyone. So it's kind of changed the face of our job. We've learned to communicate without being face-to-face, which we're people, so that's different for us, but it's effective. We've learned to make it work. We've made many, many more home visits than we used to, and the mental health has been the biggest impact. So it just the impacts from COVID, the loss of housing, loss of financial resources, possibly loss of food, possibly loss of family members, all of these things are resulting from COVID. So, and creating lots of mental health issues. So really, I would say the mental health has been one of the biggest impacts from COVID, and attendance and engagement, which are also tied to mental health.
And I've said publicly that I feel like mental health is one of the biggest concerns that we have in education. And it's insidious in some ways, and I think with COVID we're seeing it out front a little bit more. And it's not restricted just to students, it involves adults as well. But we're going through a strategic planning process in the Caldwell County Schools. And what we want to look at are our goals and our vision and our mission and our belief statements. And one of the pieces that will be there that may look different, a lot of the things may look similar because we're talking about academics with a little bit of language change and things like that, but really a focus on the mental health and the social and emotional learning. Why do you think that's so important for a school system to focus on?
Well, because I truly believe that a child can't be hungry for learning if they're hungry for everything else. You know, if their mental health isn't what it needs to be and they're focused more on what's happening at home, they become depressed or they have anxiety, which we've seen an increase in all of that throughout COVID. And when COVID goes away, we're still going to have these mental health issues. So, you know, we've always had some mental health issues, and we've always believed that a child with a mental health issue is not prepared to learn. That's not front and foremost in their mind, and they just can't focus. So we just are going to have a lot more of that, I believe, after COVID. And so it's even more important for our school system to recognize how we need to approach mental health, and that it's very significant and tied to our students becoming successful academically and just as a whole. I mean, you know, to be a contributing member to society one day, because that's our goal. You know, we want them to graduate. We have had students missing. We're trying to find them. That's one of the ways we've changed. We spend a lot of time looking for our students because they've had to change addresses, but they've had to move. So, you know, mental health is a big piece of it.
Well, it's a critical element of what we do, and I want to say thank you to you and to our social workers and social workers across the state and country for all the work that they do. But having you on the set and the chance to speak with our viewers has been wonderful today. Thank you for joining me. I'm glad that you've been here. And thank you for joining us again. We look forward to seeing you next month on our next edition of Profiles. We hope you have a great day.